everybody, and welcome to the PGS here on the Burnettwork. Also, welcome to Positive Fandom. I am your host, Arton, and today we have with us Darth Plato. Darth Plato, how are you?
I'm good. It's a nice warm day out here in California. Not typical November weather, but I'm grateful
Yeah,
and looking forward to this discussion.
yeah, you're so lucky to have that warm weather. I woke up to 36 degrees here in New York. It is cold, Darth Plato, and it's okay. I had my coat, but I am cold, but it's okay.
Let me scratch off. Do not mention it's 75 degrees here off the.
Oh man, 75. You're so lucky. Enjoy the warm weather. It is November here, so I know what it means here in New York. And I do want to say hello to everybody. Tom Jr. Jackson, our moderator, collaborator, and good friend is here. Says hello and welcome to the PGS Moving Image Review. Please click the like and subscribe buttons to enjoy the show. Everybody, Darth Plato and I are here to talk about historical epics, and are they making a comeback? And I think it's really interesting, Darth Plato, because you and I talk and watch historical epics and films all the time. That's our regular thing. We enjoy having that experience of watching a film that really is meant to tell an incredible story in history. And I think that this has been such an interesting year with so many of the films that have been coming out. Of course, I can't help but mention Oppenheimer, which ironically is back in the theaters for a week in IMAX. Darth Plato, are you going to go see Oppenheimer in IMAX this weekend?
No, I'm fine with watching it here.
Well, I'm probably going to go see it with Mikey Lito, who is a PGS member. And the reason why I'm going to go see it is because it's just such a phenomenal film. And it is an epic film. And we're very lucky to get these types of films these days. But I can't help but wonder about some of the films, even over the past few years. Oppenheimer was a very different type of film, Darth Plato, because it's made almost $1 billion. Do you think that a film that most epics really have a chance like this? I mean, certainly this was an extraordinary film, but it's not a realistic expectation, or is it? What do you think?
Well, in order to make $1 billion, you have to capture the public's imagination and good word of mouth. That's probably stating the obvious. So historical movies, I don't think are going to do that. Generally speaking, uh, I can't really think of an example off the top of my head aside from Oppenheimer. It would be Titanic, I guess. But um, the movies that we've seen recently are all been comic movies. Now, does that mean that the public has more of an appetite for comic movies? I don't think that's necessarily true. I think that they'll just go watch whatever's in the theater. Now, is Napoleon going to make $1 billion? I have a feeling it's probably not, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's something to think about. And I think that I hadn't thought about Titanic. Certainly, I would consider that an epic film. It
Yeah.
certainly made a huge impression on people. I think it certainly brought a lot of interest into, that kind of disaster style film, and also the execution of Titanic. As far as I'm concerned, is I would consider it a historical epic, even if it is, for the most part, very dramatized. However, we don't see a film like Titanic all the time. It is a very special film. The same for Oppenheimer, and certainly for a number of different films that we're very lucky to get. It's not that common. So, talking about making a comeback is mainly because of the films that we're seeing this year, which seem to have such a profound effect, not just on the box office, but of the people who are watching it. It really is something to think about. And I think that, that's why we want to have this discussion. I saw a very interesting article, Darth Plato,
Yeah,
about historical films, and
yeah. I was just reading it.
I'm going to share it with the viewers here. And certainly, I would like people to comment about the article. And I'm going to pop it up here. Let me see if I can do this correctly. And the article is called "Are We Entering a New Golden Age of Historical Epics?" Now, this article came out a while ago, was published in August. And this is something that you and I have been talking about, Darth Plato, a lot, because I'm always interested and where the future of historical films and in specifically epic films are going. We've seen a lot of historical films come out over the
Yeah.
past few years. Certainly, you and I have done a lot of watch parties. Some of my favorites, I think, were Operation Mincemeat, which I had watched recently, and Greyhound, which I really was shaken by.
Yes.
Um,
Yes,
and
and I wouldn't have known about that movie. You hadn't pointed out to me, so I appreciate that.
Oh, sure, of course. That's why we do this, because we love these historical films. But I also think Elvis, Darth Plato, was an interesting historical film, and I didn't know I was going to enjoy that film so much. On the life of Elvis, which I thought personally did have an epic feel to it because it spanned so many years of his life. Certainly, it was quite comprehensive in my opinion, and certainly Elvis deserves a biopic like that. But this article asks a really good question about: are we entering this new golden age of historical epics? And I think it's a very interesting article. I'm going to read it, guys. It's not a super long article,
Well,
and
to just the question briefly, I don't know if we're entering a new golden age, but I sure hope we are.
you know something? I feel the same way, Darth Plato. And let's see what this article presents, because I think looking and trying to understand where movies are going, we always hear these comments about how movies are dying and people aren't interested in seeing them. But certainly, $1 billion, almost $1 billion for Oppenheimer, suggests that the moviegoers are out there. And if it is a historical film, as you said, that can grab people and touch their hearts, they're going to go ahead and spend the money. The same thing I think happened with Titanic, although that was a different era. But let's go ahead and read this article. It says, with a Napoleon biopic and Gladiator sequel on the horizon, there's clearly an appetite for big event movies. And this article was published in August of 2023. And now that the radioactive fallout from Oppenheimer's detonation is starting to settle, and the mushroom cloud that was Barbenheimer has drifted away on the breeze, it's a bit easier to see the whole thing for what it was. Christopher Nolan has made a good film, and loads of people went to see it at the cinema. And so far, it's made north of 725 million on a $100 million budget. Happy days, whichever way you slice it. Of course, it's made much more than that now. It's probably
Yeah.
maybe it has.
What is it at now?
I'm not sure, but I'll check as soon as I pull down this article. I can't have another page open, or else my
Okay.
computer's going to crash. Um, but maybe Tom Jr. Jackson knows how much has Oppenheimer made at this point. Maybe he can check for us. I would appreciate it. Um, Leave aside the typically Nolan-esque time scrambling narratives, and Oppenheimer is, in a lot of ways, a blast from the past. It's a war story packed with stars, led by prestige director, and hotly tipped for award season. You've seen 100 of them. They're BBC Four fodder. Yet Oppenheimer, in a quite Nolan-esque twist, might also be the future too. Oppenheimer hasn't started a trend, but it's the first of a run of historical epics which could turn out to be blockbusters like it has become. Ridley Scott continues his ridiculously productive 80s. Let me just close this for a second. Um, with a biopic of Napoleon Bonaparte, starring Joaquin Phoenix as the general and Vanessa Kirby as his wife, Josephine. When it was announced, Scott said he'd always been fascinated by the French emperor. He came out of nowhere to rule everything, but all the while he was waging a romantic war with his adulterous wife, Josephine. Scott said he conquered the world to try to win her love, and when he couldn't, he conquered it to destroy her and destroyed himself in the process.
Yeah, I don't think that's a very charitable characterization, but moving on.
He's also working on Gladiator Part 2 with Esquire's newest cover star, Paul Mescal and Pedro Pascal, which should be gigantic. They're all about different times and different ideas, and their attitudes toward actual history range from painstakingly researched to a broad feeling for vibes. And really, the historical epic never went away, but it feels like it's back as one of the pillars of big event movies after some time gathering dust in the archives. There's a distinction here between historical epic and period drama. A period drama plops a story and characters into a time and place in a few specific bits of the past. the whole of the 20th century is up for grabs. Plus, the gaudier bits of the 19th, the fancier bits of the early 18th, and Shakespearean London. A historical epic is less about using a time and place. I just have to mute your for a second because it's actually overshadowing my what I'm saying. There's a distinction between here for epic and period drama. I'm going to jump down. A historical epic is less about using a time and place as a setting and more about using it as an engine for the story. Gladiator might be fictional, but it's the heaving tides of history that take Maximus Decimus Meritus from the front lines of war against Germanic tribes to North Africa and back to Rome. But more than anything, it's about the size of the ideas. Period dramas tend to be drawn on a smaller scale, while historical epics reach for something timeless and gigantic. For instance, Oppenheimer broke apart the fundamental matter of the universe and made it possible for humanity to destroy itself. Pearl Harbor was more interested in blowing things up. One is epic, the other is Pearl Harbor. We're in the middle of one of the occasional booms in historical movies. Last year was The Woman King and All Quiet on the Western Front, both of which made their mark. The latter won 7 BAFTAs, including Best Film. But along with musicals, they're a type of movie that have been popular as long as there have been movies. The late 20s and 30s were a golden age between 1929 and 1939. 6 of the 10 Best Picture Oscar winners were historical epics. They were big through the early 60s too. The Elizabeth Taylor, Richard Burton, Cleopatra bombed, but was a massive story, while Ben-Hur, Spartacus, El Cid, and Lawrence of Arabia were huge hits. You can see the appeal for filmmakers and studios. Some of these stories were so embedded within the culture that everyone roughly knows what they're getting themselves into beforehand. Making a movie about Napoleon or Hitler or Henry VIII or Helen of Troy makes marketing a breeze. It's the historical equivalent of making another Expendables. You know where you are. So why are they back now? Well, on one level, let me just close this. On one level, they might not actually be back. This might be 2 Ridley Scott films and a Chris Nolan film landing in the same 18-month period to the power of a one-off grassroots cross-promotional meme storm. This isn't like the boom in biopics about products and brands. It's not like every streamer is going to be able to join the rush by running to one of Britain's A-list directors and getting them to knock together a biopic of Charlemagne, although I would love that. I think there's certainly something to the excitement which Oppenheimer, Napoleon, and Gladiator 2 have generated, though. They're all likely to be very serious films with designs on big awards. And though the stock of historical movies goes up and down, it's rare that there is a year when not a single one is nominated for Best Picture Oscar. It was 2009, the last time that happened, but none of those movies challenged the top 10 of the biggest grossing movies in their years. You've got to go back to The Last Samurai in 2003 for the last historical movie to make the global top 10. As it stands, Oppenheimer is 4th in the 2023 list. Oppenheimer strikes a noticeably grown-up tone for a big event movie to take over after a good 15 years where most of the big event movies have either been from Marvel or the world of Avatar. In fact, movies like Oppenheimer are the exact opposite of the huge hits we've gradually become blasé about. Not every movie can be an event, but as the various multiverses unravel, there's hope in the fact that stories told inevitably by skilled directors have shown that they can get people buying cinema tickets and talking about movies. We're not looking at a chain reaction, but a spark which might catch light. So I believe that's the end of the article, and I can kind of just close that. And sorry about that, Darth Plato. I just had to mute the sound because it was coming back and forth. But Darth Plato, did you read the article, and what did you think of the article?
I think this is a superb article. I think it hits on a lot of bring it up again. It hits on a lot of points that are true. I'm not sure about the period drama historical epic dichotomy. Seems a bit arbitrary, but I appreciate the what he's trying to do there. I'm curious what the 2009 reference was. I don't get that.
Yeah, but I think it is very interesting because it's almost as if the author is saying that this is a very special year where we haven't necessarily seen direct any one or two directors be able to reach this heights in their films, and perhaps
Well,
that is true.
well, hold on a second. Let's turn this around a little. Let's have fun with it a little bit.
All right.
Um, if Oppenheimer making a lot of money means that the historical movie is back, does that mean that because Barbie made Barbenheimer, that means the first half of that is Barbie? That means Barbie made more money. Does that mean that the toy movie is back?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I hope it is.
You could just as easily pose that question based on that criteria.
You could, and Michael Lito says that that Oppenheimer has made $944 million globally, which is a huge amount of money, almost $1 billion.
That's
Certainly
probably
something.
why they want to re-release the movie so that it does hit $1 billion.
Yes, and I think Michael Lito and I are probably going to go see it if we can figure out a day to see it in IMAX, and I think it's worth every penny to see it. I enjoyed the film so much. I have no problem watching it again and again and again if I could. But I also think that it is very interesting in the sense that all of this happened, even though it's post, or let's say before this big strike, this that has kind of had a huge effect over
Yeah.
productions. All of this managed to come out before that time, and if the timing had been in any other way, it could have greatly affected these films. And I'm wondering, honestly, if there are other films that are being, obviously other films are being held up, but if there are other epics that are being held up now. Darth Plato, you and I've talked about Napoleon quite a lot. We've watched a bunch of miniseries. From what I understand, they're going to be coming out with a theatrical version, and then of course another version on Apple TV that's going to be almost 4 hours. Do you think, because of the success from Oppenheimer's 3 hour film, that they feel that they can go ahead and release a 4 hour epic, which I guess will be on streaming? I mean, do you think it's influenced length of epic films? Because I always associate epic films with being longer. What do you think?
That's a nice thought. I'm not sure if that's actually true. I think that the planning for those two things are probably separate. That's a nice thought, though. But to go back to an earlier point, history, it's always said that truth is stranger than fiction. So look at history is like an untapped gold mine. There's all kinds of things out there that we could be tapping, and it's and not just like taking an event in history or a person in history and just writing about it, but you can take a theme of history and recreate it, and recreating in a modern sense that sort of like paying tribute to the past. Now that's not really a historical movie per se, but the fact that we know that we can learn from history and gain inspiration from that, because we're all, after all, we're all imagination connoisseurs, and create something based on that experience. Like, for example, like say Battlestar Galactica season 3, which I should have mentioned it the last time we did this stream, but the movie Bon Voyage that we saw, the political backstory of that closely mirrors the political backstory of Battlestar Galactica season 3. And as a history guy, I really appreciate that. Now, that's not a historical piece per se, but it's how we can learn from the past, history included, and create something that can stand the test of time.
It certainly is a good point. And J&H Edits asks, is long length a requirement to be considered epic? And I'm going to say that it would definitely have to cover more material for me. Um, what do you think, Darth Plato? Um,
Honestly, I think epic just means the director. It has to be the right director. Like, think about it. What would Oppenheimer have looked like if it wasn't Nolan? What if it had been like, say, I don't know, that Kevin Smith guy? I'm not so sure it would have been quite as interesting.
and also the cast as well, I think, have a huge effect over the outcome of the marketability of these films. And certainly, I haven't necessarily seen a marketing campaign. I think somebody else in the chat mentioned how this Barbenheimer thing, and of course, in the article,
That's
they
true.
talked about it. It was very unusual. I was very skeptical. I thought, honestly, that it was not a great idea to go ahead and do that because I said, why on earth do we have a situation where you're advertising Barbie with Oppenheimer? It felt like a contradiction to me.
I thought
But
it's actually clever.
yeah, it ended up, and that
I
I'm
thought it was
glad you said
clever
that. It ended up being a huge success, maybe one of the most successful
because,
campaigns of all time. So,
well,
honestly,
I've always learned that part of learning that sometimes it helps to learn something if you can take complicated information and reduce it to a mnemonic device that's easier to remember, because it's easier because if you can catch it into your mind, it's easier to recall, and it can help stimulate imagination as well. So Barbenheimer is sort of like this catchy little phrase, and as soon as I saw the term Barbenheimer, I knew what they were doing. It's a marketing thing, so it catches into your mind, and people are going to go see probably both movies. And I thought it was obvious what they were doing. I thought it was actually kind of clever because it
absolutely.
reminded me of that mnemonic device.
Absolutely, and it is very unique to have something like that. But I also am curious about funding for historical epics, Darth Plato, and we know that they tend to cost a lot of money, um, not just because of the need in some cases for special effects, but the costumes and recreating that era is expensive.
Yeah,
Do you think that's a huge hindrance to making them?
it could be. Money is definitely a concern for anything. If you have to have something that's interesting enough to grip people to want to spend money. And in order to do that, I think we both hit on both heads of this coin. The director, you got to have a big name guy, and you got to have a cast. And if you have those things together, you can get a winner. Or you can end up with something like Pearl Harbor. So one of those two things are going to happen.
Okay, and JH Edit says Barbenheimer was an amazing time to be a moviegoer. There were so many people in the theaters, and I love seeing that. Yes, it really was. Um, something to think about. And Paul from Long Beach has an interesting question who says, and hello, Paul from Long Beach, says, did historical films ever really go away? Before he passed, Chadwick Boseman played Jackie Robinson, Thurgood Marshall, and James Brown. Yeah, this is a good question about historical films. Certainly, I think they have been made steadily. And I guess if I were looking at those, yes, historical films, I don't think they ever really went away. I'm curious as to how the film versus, let's say, this dramatization versus a biopic, which where we expect the biopic to be somewhat more attuned to what actually has happened in the person's life versus sometimes there's a dramatization of someone's life and it's not necessarily everything that's happened. Do you think one is favored more than the other over the last few years, Darth Plato?
Probably, I'm not sure how I can really justify that. I think that, to be fair, I think the article was really referring to the previous golden age of movies where they were then you had Lawrence Arabia and Spartacus and Ben Hur. You had a lot of really good movies in a close packed period of time. I think that's what he's referring to. The author, I mean, it's referring to. He says, is the epic back? Are we going back to that time where we're going to have a string of these kind of movies in close succession? So we had All Quiet on the Western Front last year, which I think was a very good historical movie. A tad over political, in my opinion, even though it was subtle. Um, of course, we have Oppenheimer, and now we have Napoleon. Hey, I don't even know what's on the slate for next year.
Yeah, this is a good point. And certainly, he in the article they talked about Gladiator Part Two. Gladiator, the first one was
Right?
an incredible success.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about that film coming out? And do you think it's because there has been this focus on trying to have, the sequel, or do you think this is something that I don't know anything about what the film may be focusing on. Do you
I'm
think
pretty
it's
sure. I'm pretty sure it's going to be focusing on the post Caligula, not Caligula, Commodus era. So that would be Septimius Severus. That would be the Roman emperor during those years. I realize that's probably a name that probably not going to jive with people like well, everybody's heard of Caesar, everybody's heard of Augustus, everybody's heard of Nero. Septimius isn't really one of those names that people go, okay, I know what this is going to be about. So, but that's basically what it is. It comes right after he was the guy that came onto the scene, some not immediately after, but some years after Commodus. So what's it going to be about? Honestly, I don't know. Is it going to be the arena? Again, I don't know.
That's an interesting question. Do you think, looking at the way that we've had a lot of people be interested in, perhaps the Oppenheimer film, but perhaps maybe not in All Quiet in the Western Front, do you think that the public interest is stronger for more recent stories, or do you think something like Napoleon is going to get everybody excited the way that Oppenheimer seemed to draw interest?
I have a feeling that they're going to try to tack onto the romance angle of that story, in which case I think they're going to reinforce my critique of Joaquin Phoenix for this role. I think they should have got a younger guy to play it. If that's what they try to do, I think they should try to do that because, after all, she was 6 years older than he was. And you would never know that watching the trailers. I don't want to be the stingy guy that's like, oh, that's not historically correct. Oh, look what they're doing. Yeah, I can't help it as a history guy, but I try to appreciate the fact that we are getting this. I'd rather that we had these movies to just to have this discussion at all. So I'm just glad that we're getting the movie at all, and I'll balance my gratefulness for that versus the historical errors, whatever they may be, on the other. So will Napoleon capture the imagination? I don't know. I can't predict something like that. I suspect probably not because he's a really controversial guy.
Right. And it is kind of interesting too, because I think that certainly that controversy has, I guess, cast a shadow on his historical, you know, I guess, legacy, if you will. I also want to talk about the idea of, we had another epic film that we watched called Troy on Positive Fandom, and I certainly do consider that an epic film. And for those of you who are in the chat who have also seen it, it certainly isn't what I would call just historical. I think it was an epic. Um, but
No, but the story itself has a big impact on the history of the world. So although the events of the story are itself are not historical, like the Trojan War, Achilles, etc., nevertheless it's part of the historical fabric of the world because it's a story that was so important to the classical era, and the classical era is so important to us that, and there's a reason why this story and the people that fought in them are still household names to this day. That's why I think that you can justify putting it into the historical category, even though it's not historical per se.
yes, and so, but if I had to separate it, I would put it more in the epic
Sure.
category. And with that being said, it's a film that I honestly can say, subject matter, I would go ahead and watch another version of Troy if they remade it. I think it might have been almost 20 years since the last one was made. Darth Plato, knowing that people are still interested in certain, let's say, movie topics, do you think it's something that Hollywood should just continue to do towards the ones where they have had more success, like Spartacus, like Troy? Should they focus on that, or should they take a chance with something like Oppenheimer, or even Titanic? What do you think?
Again, I think it depends on who has a good idea, who has a director lined up, and who has a cast lined up. I don't think it's going to happen without those things. Otherwise, they're just going to play it safe. And what's safe is superheroes and video game movies or toy movies. Like Barbie. Barbie's a toy movie. Or Super Mario. Super Mario is a toy movie or a video game movie.
Well, Super Mario did very well this year. It certainly is.
Sonic. Yeah,
Um,
yeah, Mario, Sonic, that stuff. That stuff makes a lot of money. All that stuff.
It certainly does. However, I don't think that, well, it is something to think about. Do you think that there's less of a shine towards superhero films these days, or do you think there's still the same amount of interest?
Well, I think I just listened to Rob the other day run that into the ground. I don't think there's anything that I can add that Rob hasn't already said, except
Well, I mean, what do you think, in your
what
opinion?
I was about to get to that. What I think is, I was really fascinated at first by the whole thing because I grew up with comics. It's like, really they're gonna put Captain America on the big screen. Yeah, I'll watch that. Wait, they're gonna make it. They're gonna do another. I always get excited when I see Batman because I love Batman. But had never. But we've seen Batman movies going back, I don't know how many decades now. I don't think I've ever seen a Captain America on screen. I was like, okay, yeah, sure, I can get behind that. Yeah, the Avengers, yeah, I can get behind that. Yeah, yeah, bring it on. I want to see this. I was looking forward to it. And for Phase One, I like Phase One. I thought Phase One was interesting. But it kind of and Winter Soldier, I thought Winter Soldier was pretty well done. There were moments where I kind of scratched my head in front of, okay, really, why are they doing that? But I thought it was a positive experience. But after Winter Soldier, it kind of went downhill for me. I wasn't impressed with Infinity War as much as other people were. I thought that some of the choices they made were really bizarre. Um, so I was kind of disappointed by Infinity War, honestly, and Endgame was not an improvement for me. And I was already kind of like starting to get out. And I think part of why did I get out? I think part of the reason why I was getting out is because the Phase One I thought were pretty faithful adaptations of the comic version of those characters. You look at Iron Man and Steve Rogers and Thor. I thought, yeah, I can believe that these were the guys from the comics brought to the big screen. I can believe that. But then they started moving away from that. I once you start getting into Iron Man 2, 3, and Captain America 3, like Civil War. Civil War was a big break for me. I didn't like Civil War. I just didn't believe that these characters would really do these things. Like Thor Ragnarok. Thor Ragnarok was a big break for me. I do not believe for one second that Thor would act like that, or that people in the movie would act like that. Like, but wait, Thor and Hela are siblings? Who the hell wrote this? It absolutely broke it for me because I was a guy from the past. I wasn't some guy walking the street. Oh, I've never seen this before. I'll just go watch. Oh yeah, sure, okay, I'll watch it because I had that thing from my past comic in the past. Thor. I know what Thor is. I know what Thor is supposed to look like. What he's supposed to talk like. How he acts. How he interacts with these characters like Hela and Loki. I just after Phase One, I didn't believe. At least looking at me, I'm doing my rant. Um, but once you get into the MCU stuff, I was singularly unimpressed. Agents of Shield was okay for a while, but it started to go south when they decided not to mention whatsoever the snap. They just decided not to mention whatsoever. That kind of went downhill for me. I really like Agent Carter though. I'm a big supporter of Agent Carter series. Um, I'll also give a good thumbs up to Ms. Marvel because I'm not exactly sure why. There's something really endearing and sweet about that show that I just really like. Maybe it's just the emphasis on the family, which I think is just really lacking nowadays. But I'm a defender of that series. So Ms. Marvel, Captain, and Ms. Marvel, and I just said it. the the Peggy Carter series. After that, it kind of went away. And don't even get me started on the DC stuff.
Well, the author in this article mentions that in the past 15 years or so, most of the big event movies have been either from Marvel or the world of Avatar, and goes on to say, in fact, movies like Oppenheimer are the exact opposite of the huge hits we've gradually become blasé about. And I think
I
it's
thought he made a mistake there when he didn't mention the toy video game stuff. But that's pretty big too. He said it in the article, Barbenheimer. He doesn't even mention the first half of that, which is Barbie. That was a huge phenomenon in movies. He should at least acknowledge that in that sentence. He could have done that in that sentence right there, but he didn't. Avatar, yeah, sure, okay, I'll give you Avatar. But then again, that the Avatar is a good example of a movie where you have a director that knows what he's doing, who say, "I got an idea and I'm going to do it," and because of he is who he is, James Cameron, they're going, "Okay, well, you're James Cameron. We're going to give you this money. Go and do it." Nolan has that kind of sway. That's part of the reason why Oppenheimer was such a good movie. Like he knows what he's doing. He got the money to make it. And I'm, you know what I mean.
It's a good, it's an interesting point of view, and I'm also wondering, in your opinion, I know for me, I love anything epic, and as they can pack more into a film and make it epic, I'm happy with it. But for so many of these historical figures, like Napoleon,
Yeah.
like Achilles, as we saw in the movie Troy, do you think it's necessary to for it to be an epic film in order to stand out from other films that have been made in the past of the
No,
same
I
subject?
don't. Well, no, because look at the reason I've been making the recommendations I have for our movie watching is because I want people to be exposed to movies that they might not otherwise have seen, things that are not so obvious. So I haven't been recommending stuff like Patton or Spartacus or Lawrence of Arabia or stuff like that. These are all usual suspects, and they're great, and we could certainly watch them. That's true. And someone might be wondering, well, why haven't you? Well, because I thought that the best way to go about this was to shed the light on movies that people might not be aware of. That's why I recommended Bon Voyage. Bon Voyage is not a movie that I think most people know about. And In Diplomacy is another one that I told Rob about some time ago, and some of the other movies that you mentioned Greyhound yourself. I wouldn't know about that movie if it wasn't for you mentioning Greyhound. And I offered Operation Mincemeat, and you offered shit, I forgot the name of it, Anthropoid. It's the same thing. I wouldn't have known about Anthropoid if you hadn't mentioned. I might not have ever seen that movie. So that's where I'm coming from. I want to shed light on movies that we might not have otherwise seen.
That's a good point, and I do want to thank A World of Pajamas. Hi, for a £5 super chat. So good to see you. I am going to reach out to you, A World of Pajamas. Don't worry, I was just literally looking at threads to see how to get in contact with you, and hope you're well. A World of Pajamas says, worried about Napoleon. Josephine's supposed to be younger than him. I know someone who was involved in the archaeology of a mass grave found in Lithuania. Wow, this is quite a super chat. First of all, thank you.
Yeah, Napoleon was born in 1769, and Josephine was born in 1763. So she was 6 years older than he was, and it was very shocking to his family that he married Josephine. It really surprised them. And well, as far as the public was concerned, they were the same age because they lied about her age. But people who knew who she was knew the truth.
Interesting. And I do want to thank A World in Pajamas for giving us this super chat. It's very generous of you. Certainly, it is interesting for people who are involved in archaeology. And what I enjoy with these archaeological exploits is that sometimes it helps to rewrite history as we know it. So it certainly is enjoyable to see somebody who is doing that kind of work. I hope you are well, A World in Pajamas. Good to see you. Thank you so much for the super chat.
Yeah, I had an invitation once to go to Italy to watch a dig on one of the old Roman battlefields.
Oh,
Yeah,
that is
but
exciting. And I do want to get your opinion about some of, let's say, other epic films.
okay.
And I'm not quite sure whether you have seen them all. I'm guessing, oh, why is it doing that? But some that we've briefly talked about, we haven't talked about in length. But one epic film that I want to talk about because it was, I think, done so well is a film called Gandhi.
Okay.
Now, you and I have yet to watch this film. I have a feeling we will watch it. It is very long.
I've seen it. Yeah.
Yes, as have I. Many of the people in the chat. Certainly, it is an epic film starring Ben Kingsley,
Yeah.
who plays Mahatma Gandhi. And something that I think is really interesting about it is how the film does seem to kind of steer away from, let's say, Gandhi in the picture for me, which is fine because they're trying to put the entire thing in context for you. But certainly, if you watch it, I think it is very interesting. It's an experience. It's a journey. What did you think of this epic film? And did you like Gandhi? Did you like it, Darth Plato?
I liked the movie. I thought it portrayed the story they were trying to the they were trying to explain what Gandhi was during his political movement, the Satyagraha, I believe is how you say it. and I thought it was compelling. I'm trying to be neutral when I tell it because there's another side to this that I'm not sure if I want to get into or not, and that is the historicity of it. Is the portrayal of Gandhi actually is this the portrayal of Gandhi that his supporters want us to know versus what was really going on? Because this is a really a hot topic and historiography of Gandhi, and did he really do and say these things? Was he a fraud? So when you see Gandhi, you see people going up to his house, and he's sitting there in his simple house. Was that really where he lived, or was that just where he met them because he was trying to give that appearance? There are people who make that claim, and because I'm not an expert on the life of Gandhi, I can't speak one way or the other. But considering the sheer weight of the number of people and who they are making this claim, I kind of have to wonder there might be something to this. So I can't really weigh in on one way or the other. But as far as the movie goes, I would recommend seeing this film. It is an epic film, and at the very least, it can get. I just thought of this, and I should have mentioned this at the top of the program. One of the things that I really want getting out of a movie, Napoleon movie, Oppenheimer, and we'll say Gandhi, it generates discussion. So you want to watch Gandhi? Sure, let's do it. And but be careful, it might generate a discussion that might go in an unexpected direction.
Well, as you know, Darth Plato, I'm looking at it from a cinematography point of view.
Fair enough.
So that's my main focus. The content, I think, is the director and the writer's choice.
But
And certainly some of the finer points in the film.
for
I'm
what they were trying to do, I was very impressed with it.
Yeah, it was impressive, wasn't it? It felt like you were back in that time. It felt like you were in the neighborhood. And I was transported to that era and perhaps the sentiment that you could almost feel the tension, even though there were very peaceful moments in the film. Uh, there was this sense of, of course, we know the ending of what happened to Gandhi, but you really did get this sense of this fear. At least I had a fear of what was going to happen at the end, even though I knew what was going to happen at the end.
Well, they showed it at the beginning of the movie.
Yes, but I think that that's very interesting to have that fear in a film where I wasn't expecting to have that kind of feeling about it. After all, it's about another person, not about me. Why should I be afraid? I thought that they really gave you a very interesting feeling in the film, and that's one of the things I think that makes it very special. Dan Candy for a 4.99 super chat says, "Will the Time Bandits cameo in the Napoleon director's cut?" Um, I don't know. Darth Plato, do you have an answer to this?
Will the Time Bandits
I don't know.
will the little people and the Time Bandits cameo in the Napoleon director? That would be amusing, but I would say no.
I thought maybe they were alluding to the notion of what is going to be cut out of the film because they can't, there's a theatrical version, which we're going to see. But of course, as we mentioned, there's going to be the Apple version that's going to be 4 hours. And
Well,
you and I are going to
yeah, will we see the phone booth for Bill and Ted?
you and I are going to talk at length about the film version of the film, and I just love that they're doing that. I can't get enough of that. I can't get enough of Lord of the Rings movies, which are extended. Every time, yeah, I said, "Oh, it's a 4 hour version." I will watch that, and I think sometimes when they do make films like that, and you can continue with the film and enjoy it, it has done what it was intended to do, which was to entertain you, even if it is kind of can be a thorny topic. But I also wanted to talk about another film. Some people may not think that it is an epic film, which is fine. But I saw it, I think it was the year before last, and I was so impressed with it. Let me see if I can pull it up here. It's a film called The Northman. Darth Plato, have you seen The Northman?
The Northman, is that the if that's the movie I'm thinking of? Yeah, I've seen that. Let me see. Oh yeah, I've seen that.
So, in regards
Love
to,
it.
uh,
I love
yeah,
it, by the way.
well, I'm so glad to hear that. I enjoyed this film too. Made in 2022, starring Skarsgård and Nicole Kidman and Bjork is in it. It really had this. this sense of being taking you far away. I almost felt like it did feel like another time, but I almost even thought it felt in some cases like another dimension. What
Mhm.
did you think about that, Darth Plato, that transformative approach that they took in the Northmen, which is obviously culturally significant, but also certainly wants you to grab and kind of embrace mysticism in a way I haven't seen for a while. I think it was just so invigorating and fun.
The way I like to look at it is they presented the movie the North, as if the pantheon was actually there, like kind of like how Clash of Titans is. Clash of Titans presupposes that they were actually there. Well, it's a bit more obvious in Clash of Titans because they actually showed the dialogue between the gods on Olympus. So if you take that part out, it's still obvious that there's something going on. Like the statue comes off to the like the head comes off the statue and starts talking. Okay, well, it's pretty obvious there's something going on. This movie does that same thing, which I love, in that it's not historical, and obviously for that reason, but nevertheless, what I said earlier, it treads on the past to create something in the present that at the same time honors the past. In this case, North Norse culture, to create something as an imagination connoisseur should, something that we can all enjoy.
Yeah, it really is. They took an approach that I think was a risk, and certainly it was meant to make you have evoke different emotions in you, but they didn't have to do that. They were very careful to show specific cultural practices, and I loved it. And of course, you read about it, and as I always say, Darth Plato, you can read all you want.
Well,
Uh,
not just the practices though, but some of the stuff that happened, like when he goes into the crypt and he fights the Draugr. Like, that's a great scene. I don't think that thing actually came to life, but still, it looked really cool because that's part of that. There really were the thing called Draugr in their mythology, and that's a Draugr fight. That's awesome. It was really cool to see that. The Valkyrie thing was interesting, but that came across more like a dream. Like maybe it happened, maybe it didn't. A vision of the future. Um, my favorite scene in the whole movie has to be the campfire. Did you see the campfire scene where they're doing the animal dance? That was wild. I love that scene.
Yeah, it really was, and I think that notion of what it means to it certainly was a show don't tell moment, where it had to be orchestrated in a certain way so that you could understand what was going on, and that was an experience that you have as the viewer in the theater. I think that it really hits home about this culture and the impact and what's important to this culture. Certainly, there's
And its brutality. It's very in your face about its brutality.
Yes, it was very brutal. I think it was cruel in some cases.
Yeah.
We saw people being taken from their homelands and transported and into other places unwillingly.
Well,
We
that
saw,
was common in the past, to be honest. But yeah, yeah.
and I think the way that they showed it was incredible for what we're talking about. If we're looking at it from a cinematography point of view, they certainly didn't sugarcoat it. It was tough going, and I think that the performances by the actors in this epic was refreshing because I was not expecting to see something with this level of detail and heart in it. It had a lot of heart in it. I didn't know I was going to get behind this character in such a manner. Were you on his side, Darth Plato?
We're on the side. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that that's something that a lot of times with these epics is that you find yourself kind of creating these opinions and sentiments about the character, perhaps not even in the situation they're in, but because of what they're trying to do with their lives.
I think a better that would actually be a good question for the Breaking Bad series, because can you get behind this character? Because who is this character? There's Walter White. He's basically a drug manufacturer. It's hard. How can you get behind something like that? And the answer is, well, you face him off against people who are even worse than he is, and that's how you deal with these things and characters in movies. You're putting him against people who are even worse. There's always somebody worse. But this guy, the Norse guy, we wasn't really. I wouldn't call him a bad guy, really. He took part in that raid in that village. Probably would not have been a very comfortable thing for anybody to witness.
There were some moments that were uncomfortable, and certainly that's something that you have to take with the film as a whole because you want to experience that whole thing, even
Yeah,
with.
the Richard making a good point about what I was talking about generating conversation. Oh, I saw that in the couch of my imagination. You want to learn more, like Braveheart. I didn't know anything about the story of Braveheart when I saw Braveheart, and it made me want to read more about it. Like, well, who were these people? How truthful is it? It turns out it wasn't very truthful in a lot of ways, but it was still really interesting to read about because
It
the movie was just it was such an epic movie to watch, and it just I just walked out of the theater like, oh my god, I got to see that. I got to see that again.
Absolutely. The Richard says, I like historical epics. We can learn the facts later in the if the film inspires us. That's the power of the film. Absolutely. The Richard, and hi to you there. And certainly Jane H. Edit says, it's not the destination, it's the journey. uh, Dan Candy, historical epics, period pieces. I'm all about them. And I think it is very interesting, as we're having this conversation about making comeback in the sense of expecting to see things like this regularly. We've seen so many incredible historic epics in the past, and I hope they continue to go down this line with this. I do want to also mention that in the case with Oppenheimer, it's based off of a book that itself is an incredible biography
Oh, the
on
Prometheus.
Oppenheimer. And certainly that, when I think taking or at least creating a screenplay from a book that is so incredible that's a Pulitzer Prize winning book, I'm not surprised that the screenplay would be amazing because there was so much material. Even if he took a small fraction of it, you would end up with this epic movie like Oppenheimer. Now we have another super chat from A World in Pajamas. Hey, for a £5 super chat, who says, Mom was the historian in the family. Yes. I was disappointed with Jean Dubarry reviews. Oh, I like non-English history epics. Interesting. Do you have a favorite? Oh my goodness. Um,
Off the top of my head, my favorite right now would probably be Diplomacy.
okay.
That was what year did that come out? 2015, I think 2014, 2015, somewhere in there.
I
So,
don't know if I know that film, Darth Plato, but certainly I'm gonna look it up and look it up. And I'm glad that you mentioned it. I'm gonna tell you about a movie. People are kind of calling it epic, and I do personally consider it epic only because I wasn't expecting to enjoy the film so much. And it's a film called RRR. Have you seen RRR, Darth Plato?
I have, yes.
And what did you think of that film?
Um, it's great. It's kind of a cross between Conan and Annie.
Okay.
It's a musical in a lot of ways, and I was surprised by that, but it didn't really bother me. I can get behind this. What's wrong with the guy singing and dancing? There's nothing wrong with that. It was entertaining in a lot of ways. Unfortunately, it also kind of had a vibe of Inglorious Bastards. Only in this case, instead of the Nazis, they were making the British out to be like on par with the Nazis, and there are people in India that believe that, and I think that they were kind of tapping into that movie a little bit. So it does detract from the movie a little bit for me in that regard. But as far as the viewing pleasure of the movie, I think it's a movie that you could watch, anybody could watch and enjoy.
Yeah, I think that it certainly did capture a lot of audiences. Um, and it did feel as if the film was fighting against, there was a main story, but it almost felt as if the film was fighting against a regime versus, in a particular event. So I think it is very interesting. Of course, Ray Stevenson plays a baddie in the film, as one of the bad guys, along with this incredible cast directed by S.S. Rajamouli, whose films are incredible. But RRR seemed to strike a nerve with so many people. There's one scene where, and of course, it is actually a computer generated scene, but it was so over the top that
Well, yeah,
I was not expecting that, and I enjoyed it very much. But there are also scenes in RRR that I think are very interesting because they're impossible. It's something that you can't do.
Yeah,
And
yeah. I've never seen anybody use a live tiger as a weapon.
I think that sometimes when you see scenes that are impossible, however, the film still works, that's when you know you really do have something special. You have these moments in the film that it's meant to surprise you and grab you, even though it's not possible to do that. So I think a lot of times in some of these epic films, although this one is not necessarily based on a particular event, it really is spectacular. And A World of Pajamas, yeah, it is interesting to talk about your favorite non-English history epics. Um, you
DeBerry. I want to see DeBerry.
are, have
Yeah,
you seen?
I want to see DeBerry.
I'm sorry.
I want to see DeBerry.
Yes, same here. I haven't seen it either, and maybe it's one that we need to cover. Darth Plato. I also wanted to ask you, Darth Plato, were there any other films that come to mind? You brought up Titanic, which is one of my favorite films of all time.
I just mentioned Braveheart.
Yes, Braveheart as well. I I liked Braveheart. Um, what about were there any other films that we haven't mentioned that you wanted to bring up for historical epics, especially ones that were made, let's say, recently?
Recently?
Yeah, I think you and I covered one.
Yeah, Gladiator. Off the top of my okay, I can think of a couple off the top of my head. One would be Alexander.
Okay, okay. I don't know if I saw that one. Why can I do
I
this?
think it was Oliver Stone.
Yes. What is going on here? Are we still here? Yes. Okay. My computer is not cooperating. I'm trying my best to get this thing here. Okay. It's not giving me the film, but here we go. All right. Finally. My computer has been acting funny recently, but I wanted to talk about this film, which won a BAFTA award for Best Picture, which is All Quiet in the Western
Right?
Front. Darth Plato, you and I have reviewed this film.
Yep, we did.
What did you think about it now that it's been a year since we've reviewed it? And certainly, I thought it was an incredible looking film. Do you think that it's captured a whole generation of people? It did not produce at the box office. However, that wasn't the intention of the film, I think, Darth Plato. I think the lady who made the film, and this was her passion to bring it to life, to this remake of an incredible book. Um, what do you think? Do you think it's still making an impression?
I think it's hard not to. I mean, anyone that's going to watch this movie is gonna be affected by it. There's just no way. And just like the book, there's no way you can read that book and not be affected by it. You're going to watch this movie, you're going to be affected by it. It's just you
Mhm.
just are. And it's just the nature of the conflict of the time. It's the most brutal conflict in the history of mankind, bar none.
And what about the notion, Darth Plato, of, and I can't remember if the 1930s version was silent or
I
more of a
haven't,
silent, it was it?
I haven't seen it.
Well, I saw it a long time ago and I don't remember if it was, but if I remember correctly, the director of this film wanted to make this a silent film.
Really?
Um, and you and I had talked about
Oh,
it.
I remember that. Yeah. I remember reading about that.
Do you think that that would have made a difference in the impact of this film? Because there was another film made recently, I guess maybe it was about 20 years ago, where it was the
I'm
same.
glad they didn't. I'm glad they didn't. For the simple reason that if you got if you go in movies nowadays, it's hard enough to watch a movie without other people in the movie theater getting in the way. That would be even worse if it were a silent film.
Yeah, it is something to think about, and I think that in in my personal opinion as well, I agree with you. I feel like that needed to we needed to hear the noise in this film to get the impact of the let's say the shakiness of it all. And I'm going to bring this one up, J&H edits. I'm going to talk about 1917 as well, Michaelita, before we kind of stop doing this. But if you haven't seen All Quiet in the Western Front, I would recommend you guys going to see that. Which,
And watch our review of it.
well, yes, of course, if you wish to, you can watch our review. It's up to you.
Far
Um,
away.
But I want to talk about Far and Away. This one is much older. This is a 1992 version with Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman. and they call it an epic Western romantic adventure drama. It is absolutely a romantic drama. So if you don't care for romance, it's not your thing. This isn't it. But I just love how Tom Cruise absolutely won Nicole Kidman's heart in this film. It's kind of one of those coming to America movies where they come here and they can break out of their class distinctions, which I love stuff like that. Have you seen it, Darth Plato?
No, I have not.
Okay, well, I
You want to
loved
watch it? I'm game.
it. I loved it. I thought that it was wonderful, and I think it was one of Nicole Kidman's best performances. To be honest with you, certainly Tom Cruise was
When,
shining in
when,
this.
weren't they married at one point?
Yes, they were. Yes,
Was that before or after this?
I'm guessing it's probably after.
Okay.
And so here we have some comments about a World of Pajamas says, when I was studying literature in school, we had to read a lot of World War I poetry
Okay.
and watch All Quiet on the Western or anything to do with World War I always gave me shivers. It does, doesn't it? They have that movie called "And They Shall Never Grow Old,"
Yeah.
where so many of the men from World War I, they read. I think they are speaking in their own words. They've recorded them about their experiences during war, and that also gives me the chills, guys. Um, and Tom Jr. Jackson mentions All Quiet on the Western Front was brutal, but an excellent movie as well.
Whenever so it's very common in history after you have a period of enormous bloodletting that you have this the aftermath is just you have this sudden revival of art and free love, and you kind of see that in Britain after World War One. 1920 Britain is a really interesting place because it gave rise to literature and poetry like what we just referred to, what we just hinted at. It was really replete, and a lot of the language that came out of those years, that the 20s Britain, carried over and made its way across to the states during the 60s. So a lot of the language of the 60s comes from that 20s Britain, that the summer of love, the peace and love. It's a lot of the what we call hippie talk. So it's funny that the 60s actually doesn't come from the 60s. It actually originated in Britain in the 20s, and it migrated to the states during the 60s.
Yeah, that is very interesting to look at that, and thank you for sharing that, Darth Plato. And Bonzo Kilborn says, "Only thing I know about All Quiet is that it was one long take. That's not enough to sell a movie." Interesting, interesting that about that, Bonzo. And hey, Bonzo, hope you're well.
Not everyone's going to get the same experience out of a movie. So some people just don't want to watch war movies. I know a guy that will never watch like Schindler's List or Saving Private Ryan. He'll never watch those movies. To him, a movie is like Super Mario. It's like Spider-Man. It's MCU. He won't watch anything but stuff like that. And okay, I'm not gonna tell him what he should spend his time on. If that's how he feels, that's how he feels. And I know for a fact that there are people who are like that. Not everyone is gonna watch a movie like World War One and just walk out of it like the way we have and just go, "Wow, what an experience! Oh, I got to stream about this." Not everyone's gonna have that reaction, and I think,
That's a good point. That's a very good point.
Elvis. Yeah, I heard good things about this movie.
And then I also want to talk about Elvis. Did you see this film, Darth Vader?
I did not see it.
Well, I've seen it, and I thought that it was incredible. For a film that was made about a year ago, of course. It's directed by Baz Luhrmann, and so it's very much like um,
Elvis.
Moulin Rouge, the movie with Nicole Kidman and Ewan McGregor. It's very flashy. It feels very glitzy. It feels there's even a sense of glamour to it. And I have to admit that I don't agree with everything in the film or the direction from the film. However, that's okay because this film was so well made, Darth Plato, that I think that he outdid himself with presenting us a world of fantasy that Elvis seemed to have to be living in, that we all imagine what Elvis's life was like. And I think this was a little bit more of a realistic presentation of what it might be like to be such an enormous international star as Elvis.
You want to
Um,
talk about next week?
I'm sorry?
You want to talk about next week?
Yeah, we could do that. JH Edit says Elvis was good, but Tom Hanks was a little strange. Yeah, I had that. I felt a little. I thought he was a little creepy, but to be honest with you, I think the film still works even with that creepiness. For some people, they may not feel that way about the Colonel role that Tom Hanks.
Yeah, I don't know what you're referring to.
Well, he Tom Hanks is a character in the film, and
Okay.
certainly he plays a role where he is somewhat dominating over Elvis's life in a very uncomfortable manner, and certainly that comes across in it. But for those of you who watched it, I thought it was a spectacular, epic film with Elvis. I don't know how it did in the box office, honestly. I don't even know whether it mattered. Almost, let's see, what did it make? It says that it made 288 million, which is maybe a little bit lower than perhaps they thought it would make. But I just thought it was such an incredible accomplishment by Boz. If anybody could make this film, and it was supposed to be a celebration of Elvis's life and certainly accomplishments, that's exactly what I think this film was. So there's this film as well. But I was going to say, gee, are there any other films that you wanted to
Off off the top of my head, Kingdom of Heaven.
yeah, let's bring that one up. Another fantastic film. Now, what stood out to you about this film?
Well, it's set during the Crusade era. That's one. I don't think I've ever seen a movie that was set in that era. That's hard to get a discussion going about that time period. That's the most obvious thing to me about it.
And that's a good point. I love Orlando Bloom, so I absolutely love anything that he's in. It's like a fantasy to me for him to be doing stuff like this. He's so talented. I think he's absolutely wonderful, and certainly this is, as you said, a time period where we're not getting a whole bunch of epic films.
No.
But what a lovely portrayal of that time period.
Yeah.
Um,
Aside from Al Cid, I can't think of another one.
Yes, I think it is. He was spectacular. I think Orlando Bloom was spectacular in this, and I love it. I think he's a wonderful actor. This is a wonderful historical drama.
Yeah, this movie is very closely parallels a novel by Walter Scott called The Talisman. It was
Hmm.
written, I think, in the 1820s. So the plot of the book and this movie are actually very close to each other, except the characters that were involved in the romance have been shifted to what we saw in the movie.
And were there any other films that you'd like to mention that we, let's say, maybe even in the past few years that you and I have not brought up that either you've seen and want to talk about, or ones that you're looking forward to that we haven't mentioned?
Gladiator 2, we covered that already. Not off the top of my head. Aside from movies, no, but TV, yes. The Spartacus series, I think deserves mention. The Rome series, I think deserves mention. I think the Rome series is actually better than Gladiator. It's funny. When I was at Berkeley, the Roman history guy who was there, his name was Eric Groom. He was one of the guys that were consulted for that movie. He was so put off by what he saw that he asked for his credits for not to be mentioned in the credits. Oh yeah, 1917 was another one. Yeah, that's a good mention. That's a good catch, Michael Ito. Uh,
Absolutely, Michaelito. Thank you for mentioning that.
let's just finish the point about what I was saying about the Roman thing. So
Sure.
one of the things that he suggested that they put in the movie, and they did do this in the test screening, and so they did a test screening where one of the gladiators went out in the arena, and he did a commercial. They go buy such and stuff from such and such, and they told you the direction where to go in the form. And apparently, the um, the the test audience bombed that scene because they didn't believe it. Like, they thought that their intelligence was being insulted. Oh, they didn't have commercials in those days. They didn't have TV commercials in those days, but they really did do that. So it's funny though that this scene which was historical, that really did happen, was criticized by the test audience for being not historically believable, and so it didn't get it wasn't put into the movie, and there were other things too, and so him and a lot of other people asked not to be mentioned in credits because of stuff like that. I thought that was funny.
And I want to mention A World of Pajamas talked about The Last of the Mohicans.
Oh
Certainly
yeah, yeah.
an incredible epic
Yeah.
film.
That's another one good that good watch. Yeah.
It certainly is.
They kind of butchered the battle scene though. That's not how the battle went down at all. Unfortunately, and
Oh,
I think they may have been. I think they may have done that on purpose. But if we ever get around to watching the movie, I'll cover it then.
and I do want to mention one last film, and I'm not quite sure whether you saw it. It's one that has come out just really, I guess, a few weeks ago, made by Martin Scorsese, and of course, everybody's heard of it. And of course, is can I share this? Yes, Killers of the Flower Moon, which I have seen. Have you seen the film Darth Plato?
I haven't. 1920 Oklahoma, series of murders, the Osage Nation. Osage, that's an interesting name.
Well, I have seen this film,
Okay.
and I have to admit it's hard to watch this film. This film does talk about some terrible circumstances, essentially people who are land grabbers. And unfortunately, it was not one of my favorite Martin Scorsese films. It is a thorny topic, an incredibly thorny topic, but I think they missed out on a lot of the potential here. But it is, here they have epic Western crime drama. Um, I
Yeah,
think
it's, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I think it fell flat for me, but I think if we're looking at it from a cinematography point of view, it looks stunning. It's beautifully made film, and I think a lot of people are going to be drawn to how incredible it looks. I think it's going to win awards for things like that for production, but I'm not quite sure whether the content was up to par from what they talked about. I don't know. Mikey Lito didn't care for it either, but um, oh, uh, Oh, JH Edits. Did you see? You saw Killers of the Flower Moon? Is this the one you're talking about? It says I loved it. My family is from the town right next to where it all happened. Well, JH Edits, I'm so glad you enjoyed this film. Um, and it is good to hear another opinion about it. So I think that this film is going to be nominated for a lot of awards. What I would like to see, Darth Plato, I have a final question for you.
Yeah.
What I would like to know, and maybe some of you who have seen this film, despite the content of let's say the screenplay and the content, which I didn't care for, but I still watch. I've seen this film twice as well. Um, what I'm kind of curious about is the chemistry between Gladstone, De Niro, and DiCaprio is undeniable. I mean, it is just they're like shining fireworks off the screen in this film. And I actually want to see them in some more epic westerns. I want to see them in 4 or 5 different movies, like what we used to see in some of the old Hollywood studios when they would take stars that had chemistry and they'd put them in films together. Dark Plato, are there any epics that you've seen that makes you want to see another epic with the same stars, perhaps?
With the same stars. I'm not really sure, honestly. If it's a good if it's a good movie, I definitely want to see more. That some there's not a lot of movies where I walk out and say, "Wow, I hope they never go back to that again."
Yeah, that's a good point. And I'm trying to think of it was in my mind and it's gone now. But
I guess I wouldn't have minded seeing Titanic 2.
that's very interesting. You're joking, but I want to see Titanic too. I want to see what happens after.
I think they could have done Titanic 2 if Jack had survived. If Jack had survived, Titanic 2 would have been instead of the ship sinking, it would have been their business sinking because of the Great Depression.
Yes,
That would have been so that would have been the continuation of those characters' story, the Great Depression.
and J.H. Edis is asking if we read the novel from. I'm assuming it's Killers of the Flower Moon. I have not read the novel, but I heard that it's an excellent novel. J.H. Edis. I may go ahead and read it one of these days. I'm assuming you're recommending it.
Yeah, that actually is an interesting question, and that is what is Ridley Scott doing with Napoleon? Where is he drawing his information from concerning the life of Napoleon? Is he drawing it from Napoleon's memoirs? Is he drawing it from British historians, principally. In which case, he's just going to be the short, miserable guy that couldn't get over his ego. Is he going to be the man who was fascinated by science, who was a man of science and a man of classical liberalism, or is he going to be, or is he just going to be the British soldier? Is he just going to be the Corsican ogre? There's a lot of different takes on Napoleon, and literature, and not just, I don't mean just fiction. I mean historical literature too. So it'll be interesting to see how he does this. Yeah, he was a very complex character, very complex.
And Darth Plato, do we have a lot of material, a lot of historical material about Napoleon, right?
You do. It's probably the most written about character in modern history.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. Look at the description. The premise says that the film depicts Napoleon's rise to power
Yeah, I
through
think
the lens of his volatile relationship with Empress Josephine. What do you think about that?
I think he's laying a little thick there, honestly. I'm not sure, but I think his personal memoir, Napoleon's memoir, was the most read book of that century, that originated in that century.
Hmm, that's interesting. I didn't know that, and
Okay,
certainly,
look at, this is hard for us to grasp, but in that day and age, he was larger than life. He was so fascinating to a lot of people. Not he was feared, yeah. He was hated by some people, like particularly in Eastern Europe. Germans hated that guy. Russians hated that guy, and you can see it in War and Peace. As far as War and Peace is concerned, Napoleon may as well have been the Antichrist. But people in Britain had a really mixed opinion of him. And on the one hand, he's the enemy. He's the French dictator. He's the war of France. On the other hand, there are people who are really fascinated by his ideas because he was a man of science. He was a man of literature. He was a man of liberalism. That captured a lot of imagination of people. So after Waterloo, and he went on to the Bellerophon, and the Bellerophon brought him to Dover. He didn't get off the boat, so he never stepped foot on England, but he was at Dover on the boat. And there was a record crowd. People from all over Lower England were going to Dover to see this man. And they were waiting outside to see this man. And one of the people from the government, I think it was Lord Keith, he observed it. Napoleon walked out onto the deck, and the people in Dover, it was like they were just going crazy. They're like looking at this man who was just out there, you looking at the crowd, and they were going absolutely nuts. And Keith observed this, and they wrote to the government. He's like, this is what I saw. This is how the people were reacting to him. And that was when the government decided they can't let him set foot in England, so they sent him down to St. Helena. That was the reason why they did that.
yeah. And do you think that any epic is going to be able to do him justice? Because 4 hours is a nice chunk of
No,
time to even scratch the surface, but from the impact that he's had on history, even Josephine's impact, it seems like it'd be very difficult to kind of grasp this with, let's say, this phenomenon. He's a phenomenon, but
jo- jo-
also incredibly intelligent, incredibly talented,
Josephine
an
was
incredible
involved.
strategist. He was able to grasp people's imagination and get them to go behind him at points when it seemed like everything was lost. He managed to go ahead and get people to back him at a moment's notice. There aren't a lot of people like that, right, Darth Plato?
Sure. Um, he may be the best example of the self-made man in history. He may be.
What
I
do you?
don't.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
He may be the best example of a self-made man.
I think that's very interesting. And, if this is one of, perhaps the first incredibly well documented individuals in history
He is.
we have this information on, and certainly there are all
There,
these.
there, there are there are historians that have completely recreated his life, so we know exactly where he was every hour of every day throughout his entire life. So we can you can literally read like a book, like what he was doing every hour of every day.
With so many, versions of what this man was like, I
Yeah.
honestly haven't seen one that I'm satisfied with. What about you?
Mm. The best version of the are the books, and you have to get the right books. And I can't help you with that. You have to figure that out on your own.
Well, I think that's interesting, Darth Plato. because this is going to be, let's say, at least in this point of view, it's going to be Ridley Scott's version of this. And I think what's going to be interesting about it is this take on it, because I haven't seen a satisfying version of this character that would convince me that he is that epic individual, that man who's had this huge influence. I haven't seen a version of that,
The
and I want
closest, the
to see.
closest thing we've seen, I think, with Napoleon and Josephine, the TV movie. I thought that did a good job.
Yeah, and I want to see a version of this man that's going to blow my mind away, where I'm like, wow, this person was unbelievable. I can't believe what I'm seeing, and I think that that's really
The problem
interesting.
is his life is so complex because when you're talking about his life, you're really talking about 1789 to 1815. That's assuming that you stop with Waterloo. That's assuming you don't show Santa Lima at all. So that right there, gosh, that's what, 30 years? That's more than 30 years. It's how do you capture that? I mean, the Rome series covered basically 25 years, I think, in 2 seasons of television.
Was
You
it? I'm
so
sorry, guys.
you have to do something like Napoleon. You have to do it. Have to be I think it would have to be TV made. I don't think you can just. I don't think you can do it. I don't think you can do it. Not even in a 4 hour movie. I think Michael Lito said something just now. I missed what it said there.
Was it about
You just have.
romance, or why would the Osage go against their culture and heritage, or I need more exposition?
I can see it for myself.
All right. Well, to be honest with you, we were talking about, we don't know which version or what this
I
is
can
based
tell
on.
you.
It's written by David Scarpa, who's written The Last Castle, The Day the Earth Stood Still 2008 remake, and All the Money in the World, which was about the kidnapping of one of the richest heirs at that time. I guess it was in the 1970s, and what happened there.
It
Um,
needed more exposition.
Yeah. And with that being said, before we wrap this show up, this has been an incredible foray talking about what we're expecting from this Napoleon series. And I do have to end the stream, but I want to thank everybody who was here tonight to talk about epic films, them hopefully making comeback. Hopefully, we're going to see more. Hopefully, this Napoleon version is going to be the most incredible Napoleon version we've ever seen. I want to be blown away by this, but and just be so impressed. I don't know whether it's necessarily important whether Joaquin Phoenix looks like Napoleon, but what I do want to say is that I want to see something that's going to be spectacular. I want this to shine.
Sure.
Um, Darth Plato, what do you think? Is it going to knock us like out of the water?
I hope it does. If it doesn't, I'm going to write an angry letter. And Word of Pajamas made a good point.
Yes, and thank you. Says, I also think you were talking about a time in UK when many people in the UK were oppressed. They had no rights. There have been civil wars. I could understand the interest of Napoleon, this incredible character. I want to see that charisma. I want to see that. Oh my gosh, he's incredible. I want to be wowed. I want to be shaken. I want to see that. I want to see
Uh,
somebody who is
yeah,
all of these characters all at one time. I hope it's epic. I hope it's unbelievable, and I'm so looking forward to this one with Napoleon. I hope we're getting a new and something we haven't really seen before, where we're just going to be so blown away by what we're seeing, Darth Plato. But I want to thank you so much, Darth Plato, for joining me here tonight to talk a little bit about historical epics and the influence they're having over the box office, which is huge. The influence they might be having over other films, this resurgence with Operation Mincemeat, Greyhound, which was not an epic, but a film that they're going to be bringing back more war in, let's say, based epic films. I think it's a great time right now to be looking at this genre. Darth Plato, any final thoughts before we end the show?
yeah. I just wanted to remind you about what I said about the movie Diplomacy. So be sure to check that out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We will. I want to thank everybody who has been here tonight, sharing your thoughts. I couldn't share everybody's thoughts. I wanted to share everybody, but I couldn't. But I do want to thank especially everybody who gave us super chats tonight. Thank you so much for your generosity. Certainly from A World of Pajamas, who not only once gave us a super chat, but twice for a £10 super chat. Thank you. And also Dan Candy for a $4.99 super chat. Thank you so much for that. I also want to thank Tom Jr. Jackson, my collaborator, moderator, and good friend, Tom Jr. Jackson. You rock. Thank you so much for everything. Darth Plato, where can people find you?
Well, occasionally you can find me on the Burnett Network, but usually you're going to find me here on the It Show, the Positive Fandom. And the better question is, when are we going to see the epic movie release for our own?
What? No, there is. um,
Well, sure. There has to be an epic film for the It Girl.
I don't. There isn't one in the works. I'm sorry, Darth Plato, to disappoint you. I'm just so grateful for all of you being here and letting us know how you feel here on the PGS and on Positive Fandom, how you feel about these films coming up. I hope it certainly will be amazing to see these films coming out.
And thank you to everybody for coming, and thank you, Tom, for moderating.
Absolutely, Tom Jr. Jackson, thank you. We are all goof people. World of Pajamas says thanks for the show. And if the movie goes to pot, then we still have a series getting about Napoleon to look forward to. Yes, there's so much coming up. Let's see if we get some justice from this, guys. I want to thank you all for being here on the Burnettwork and on Positive Fandom. Thank you so much for the support, everybody. Let us know. We're going to be doing more stories and shows and videos about historical epics. Let us know some of your favorites, and certainly do join us again. Darth Plato and I are going to be reviewing Napoleon, the movie, as well as the Apple version. So please make sure you come back to Positive Fandom and the Burnettwork to check that out. Guys, thank you so much for the support. And remember, no matter where you are in the galaxy, always remember to please be kind. Take care, everybody.